Don't cook dog food in front of the relatives. John mocks me with a loud laugh. I'm at a loss for words at such a harsh insult. That stuff looks so unappetizing, there's no better way to describe it than dog food. Just redo it, will you? I immediately retort to John's words. Huh? But I'm still shopping. What? John seems puzzled, but I don't care. It's my own way of getting back at him. I'm Elizabeth Green, about to turn 50 this year. I have a daughter who's moved out, so now it's just me and my husband, John, at home. John works at a major job advertising firm, well known due to its frequent commercials. He's very ambitious, influenced by his surroundings. A man's worth is measured by his salary. That's his mantra. He seems to be working late every night to boost his income. I've been quietly supporting his hard work. I met John through a friend's introduction. I work from home, so I don't have many opportunities to meet men. The last time I had a boyfriend was in college. A concerned friend introduced me to John through an acquaintance. My first impression of John was that he was refreshing and handsome. He always looked sharp in his suit, with a stylish haircut. To someone like me, who doesn't dress up much, he seemed from a different world. But John, in his unpretentious way, said, "I'm busy with work and can't meet often, but I'll cherish you. Let's shake on it." Yes, I replied, instantly falling for him with a handshake. We started going out more often together. Our dates, however, were always just quick meals or coffee because John was always short on time. Often, his phone would ring during our dates, and we'd have to cut them short. It's work. Sorry, but I gotta head to the office. We'll make it up later, John would say, getting up from his seat. I was sad, but I understood it was his job. I accepted that. Then came John's proposal. I said yes with a smile, naively believing happy days were ahead. I had no idea that this was just the beginning of what would be 25 years of hardship. Lately, John's been coming home late. Since the early days of our marriage, he's always worked overtime, coming home only late at night. He wouldn't even eat the meals I prepared, just coming home to sleep. We hardly ever talked. That's why, early in our marriage, I once suggested to John, "Can't you come home a bit earlier? Let's have dinner together sometimes." John snapped, "Since when can you tell me what to do? Think you're better than me now?" His irritated expression shocked me. I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. I apologized immediately. I was terribly shaken, having little experience with relationships. But John wouldn't forgive me. Acting all high and mighty on your little income. Don't get cocky with your part-time job, he said and locked himself in the room. John didn't speak to me for about a week. I deeply regretted it. So, I stopped asking him to come home early. John, with his old-fashioned mindset, would often say, "A woman should be 3 steps behind and silent. You should respect and obey me." I had lost my parents to illness early on, so I didn't really know what a normal family was like. But I was deeply in love with John back then, and didn't want to break up over something like this. So, I had no choice but to obediently agree with whatever John said. John was a very kind man before we got married, always considerate of me. He never forced me to speak formally or looked down on me. I kept hoping he would return to the man he was before we got married. That hope was all I had to cling to every day. But, after 25 years, John never went back to how he was before our marriage. I was crushed by despair but somehow managed to get through each day. Then, one day, I'm home. Tired, I'm gonna take a bath, John said, yawning as he came home. Welcome home. The bath's ready. I hurried to greet him. It was 2 a.m. He must have come back by taxi. I was tidying up his shoes when I felt something odd. There was a faint scent of perfume from John's shoes, a scent I had never smelled before. John always wore cologne before going to work, but this was different. I wanted to confront him right away, but he was already in the bath. And if I did, he would probably just get angry. The perfume alone wasn't enough evidence. Reluctantly, I decided not to ask him about it. Weeks passed. The unfamiliar scent of perfume still lingered on John's shoes. By then, my feelings for John had cooled. A man who might be cheating, I wanted nothing to do with him. John probably looks down on me anyway. John probably thought I wouldn't bring up divorce. And a quiet divorce might not even affect him much. I didn't take any overt actions. Then, one day, John suddenly spoke to me. "Next Sunday, we're having a family dinner at my parents' house. You better help my mom out on the day." "Yes," I replied. At John's family home, it was a tradition to gather and have a meal together every Thanksgiving. I had always gone early in the morning to help my mother-in-law. She would pride herself on cooking the meals, while I mainly helped with cleaning and tidying up. Since my father-in-law passed away last year, we had skipped the dinner. As I thought about this, John talked happily. "Emily's coming home after a long time, isn't she? Emily is our only daughter. Currently, she's away at college. John absolutely adores her, the only person he seems to truly care for." "Yes," I answered him curtly. Then came the family dinner with relatives. I had been busy since morning, preparing at my in-laws' house. I diligently cleaned the living room, the venue for the event. "My back went out the other day, Elizabeth. I feel bad you have to do so much," my mother-in-law said. She's fragile in appearance and very kind to me. A stark contrast to John. In the midst of all this, John arrived at his parents' house. "Are you helping Mom properly? She's got a bad back, so make sure you take care of the relatives." John said this with a boisterous laugh. "John!" His mother scolded him, but he seemed unfazed. "Ah, it's all so noisy. I just wish Emily would hurry up and get here." With that, he went off to his old room, likely planning to relax there until the event started. That's when my mother-in-law asked me to buy more alcohol. "Yes, I'll go now," I said, and hurried to the supermarket. While I was buying a large amount of alcohol, my phone rang. It was John. I sighed, feeling dismayed. But I couldn't ignore the call. "Hello?" I answered the phone reluctantly. It sounded like John was already in the living room, with a lot of background noise. Probably the relatives had started arriving at the in-laws' house. Then John said something unbelievable. "Don't make dog food in front of the relatives." He laughed mockingly as he insulted me. Huh? I was confused by John's words. "I threw all the dinner out into the yard." He was loud. Because John spoke so loudly, I could hear a relative saying, "John, that's too rude to your wife." The food looked delicious. And throwing it into the yard, what a waste. I didn't know how to respond to such a terrible insult. John didn't care about my feelings or those of anyone else. "That stuff looked so unappetizing, it's nothing but dog food. Just remake it." John jeered at me with a loud laugh. I immediately replied to John. "Huh? I'm still shopping, you know? So, there's no way I could serve dinner right now." "What?" John sounded confused. "I'm at the supermarket right now, and it's a 40-minute drive from here. There's no way I can cook right now." "Huh?" John didn't seem to accept my argument. "Then who made this meal?" "It's steaming, obviously fresh. Mom said she didn't make it, so it must be you." John sounded bewildered, but I didn't care. "Anyway, I'll be heading back now. We can talk about it later." With those words, I ended the call with John. Whatever hell John was about to face, it didn't matter to me. He would probably regret it terribly. But that's just fine. After all, this was my own way of getting back at him. I'm back now. I returned to my in-laws' house with the bags of alcohol from the supermarket. "Elizabeth, I'm so sorry to trouble you," my mother-in-law said apologetically. She must have heard John's rude remarks earlier. She looked a bit uneasy. Then, as I was helping my mother-in-law, John came storming into the entrance. As soon as he saw me, he started yelling. "Cut it out with your nonsense. Claiming you didn't make that unappetizing meal. Your cooking is not fit for humans anyway. John! That's so rude to say to Elizabeth." His mother scolded him, but it didn't seem to affect him. "You should really teach Elizabeth how to be a proper wife, Mom. That's why she can never make a decent meal." John said this arrogantly, his face brimming with confidence. It's unbelievable how much he belittles others. I let out a heavy sigh at John's terrible character. "What's that?" John seemed irritated by my sigh, glaring at me intensely. No need to show any mercy to someone who looks down on others like this. I planned to bring him down thoroughly. So, with a smile, I said, "The meal today wasn't actually made by me. Shall I call the person who did make it?" John looked puzzled. "You can come out now." I called to the person hiding. The person I had waiting in another room came out. John's face went pale, his body trembling. "Dad, I'm sorry for making dog food." There stood Emily, John's beloved daughter. "No, that's a misunderstanding. I thought Elizabeth made it." "But why did you hide and cook?" John asked Emily, flustered. "I asked Emily to do it," I told John. "Elizabeth, what have you done?" "Mom, did you know about this?" His mother nodded, her face pale. "I asked my mother-in-law to keep it a secret. I wanted to surprise you." She knew how much John adored Emily. So when I said I wanted to surprise John with Emily's cooking, she happily agreed. "I can't wait to see John's surprised face," she had said excitedly. I felt bad for deceiving such an enthusiastic mother-in-law. She thought John and I were getting along well. That's probably why she was so shaken by what was happening. I explained everything to my bewildered mother-in-law. Unfortunately, John and I aren't getting along at all. His life is just about coming home to sleep, and on top of that, he's been cheating. My mother-in-law's face turned pale upon hearing this. "Hey, don't say things like that." John yelled at me. "Do you want proof?" I handed John an envelope filled with documents. "What's this?" he muttered, beginning to read the documents. His face turned ashen as he read. "So," I said firmly, "it seems you didn't notice, but lately there's been a strong scent of women's perfume. So, I hired a private investigator, and honestly, the amount of evidence that came up was shocking. I had always thought John's late returns were due to work. However, the investigator's findings revealed that it was due to his affairs. It seems John had been making advances to women at work and business partners. Even the phone calls during our dates were with other women." I spoke to John in a calm voice. "It's amazing, isn't it?" While I was balancing work and taking care of our home and child, John was out having fun with other women. Hit with the truth, John's face showed frustration, and he fell silent. Ignoring John, I continued speaking. "But recently, you need to gift brand bags to have an affair with girls, huh? They won't pay attention to you unless you spend money. How pitiful. Is that why you've been stingy with the household expenses lately?" John had been reluctant to contribute to household expenses recently. He said, "Now that Emily has moved out, we don't need that much for household expenses." No matter how much I argued, he wouldn't give any. So, I had to cover them with my income. It turned out he was using the money for his affairs. The relatives, who had gathered at the entrance by then, were appalled. "John, having such a good wife and still cheating, that's despicable for a man," they said with disgusted expressions. I firmly declared to John, "I'm divorcing you, John. Why don't you remarry one of your mistresses? Of course, I'll be taking a fair amount of alimony." John was visibly shaken by the mention of divorce. "Don't divorce me. I've spent most of my savings on my mistresses, so there's barely anything left. I can't afford a divorce." I was astounded by his selfish reasoning. Indeed, The private investigator's report showed John spending on high-end restaurants and brand bags for his affairs. Even with a job at a major company, there's no way he could have savings left after spending like that. You are the worst, the relative said, looking at him coldly. Emily glared at John in silence. John seemed to finally realize the atmosphere around him, looking somewhat uncomfortable. I began to speak to John dispassionately. Do you really think such a selfish reason will hold up? And it seems you're relying on my income now, but you've always looked down on my work-from-home job, haven't you? A home-based job is just a side gig. I, working at a major company, am much more significant in society, John stated proudly. Clearly, he had no remorse for his past actions. And still looked down on my job. It was time to shatter his pride. I dropped a bombshell. I'm a freelance engineer. While my income fluctuates, it's about the same as yours annually. What? What do you mean? John was utterly bewildered. After graduating from an online university, I landed a job at a major telecommunications company and later went independent. I've been able to secure projects due to my career experience. Without a decent income, I couldn't have maintained our lifestyle, especially since you haven't been contributing to the household expenses recently. John slumped down, crestfallen. Elizabeth is earning as much as me. It seems John was taken aback by the amount of my income, much more than he expected. He's clearly in a state of shock. In truth, I could have divorced you earlier, but I didn't want to make Emily live with a single parent. That might have complicated her marriage prospects. I continued. Emily was still single. And I didn't want her marriage prospects to be affected. So, I had been hesitant to initiate a divorce. Suddenly, John looked at Emily and pleaded, clinging to her. Emily, you don't want your mom and dad to divorce, do you? Please, say something to Elizabeth. He was desperately trying to find words, but Emily looked at him coldly. Emily! John was clearly confused. Emily sighed deeply and said, I'm disappointed in you, Dad. I want Mom to be happy and divorce you. It's okay if I marry someone who doesn't mind having a single parent. I don't care about you anymore. Emily turned her eyes away from John. When I had explained everything to Emily, she was furious, saying, I don't need a dad who's always cheating and doesn't even provide for the family. So go ahead and do what you need to, Mom. I'll support you. She had encouraged, leading to this moment. John always had something to complain about everything I did. So, I expected him to make some nasty comment when I served dinner. Indeed, his reaction was more extreme than I anticipated, which probably accelerated Emily distancing herself from her father. Please don't give up on me, John pleaded, tears streaming down his face, rejected by his beloved Emily. What a pitiable man, I muttered to myself. Both my mother-in-law and the relatives were keeping their distance from John. No one was there to console him. A natural consequence of his past actions. John remained crying in the same spot for a while. Afterward, my divorce from John was finalized. But it wasn't easy. John vehemently opposed the divorce. At the law firm, he kept insisting, I will never agree to a divorce. Apparently, he didn't want a divorce because he had no money left. But the evidence of his affairs was overwhelming. When I declared, if you don't agree to the divorce, I'll increase the alimony, his face turned pale. Sweating profusely, he finally said, I'm sorry, I'll agree to the divorce. After the divorce, John was dumped by his mistresses. He had no money left. Unable to give them what they wanted. I also claimed alimony from the mistresses. They were only interested in John for his money. And now that he was penniless, they had no interest in him. So, John was left alone, living a very lonely life. Even Emily cut off contact with him, saying, I can't think of someone who cheats as a father, and blocked his calls. His relatives did the same, distancing themselves after the affair was exposed. John, through his lawyer, tearfully apologized. I'm so sorry. I'm all alone now, every day is so lonely. Please, let's start over. Then Emily and Mom will treat me as before. John must have been desperate to say such things. Being alone in his 50s must be hard. But it's all his own doing. I hope he reflects on his actions. I firmly requested my lawyer to convey my refusal to reconsider the relationship. Time passed, and the end of the year arrived. I moved out of the house I shared with John, using the alimony as a down payment for a condo. The apartment is a 2-bedroom with a living room, dining area, and kitchen, ideal for someone living alone. Today, Emily had come home for a visit. "Do you want to go see Dad?" I asked her, but Emily made a face of displeasure. "I never planned to forgive Dad. Besides, spending New Year's with just you, Mom, sounds more enjoyable," she said with a bright smile. Life with John was indeed challenging. But having Emily made it bearable. Emily is my treasure. "Thank you, Emily," I said to her, filled with gratitude. Blushing slightly, she replied, "I'm really glad you're my mom." "Thank you." After the divorce, I wondered what would become of us, but my work remained steady, and I had Emily. I'm not considering remarriage yet, but there's time to think about it slowly. My second chapter in life has just begun. With the new year dawning, I vowed to keep striving forward.